everyone, it's Nick from Nick's Crossing, and welcome to the train room. Today we're going to be talking and reviewing the beautiful E33 locomotive from MTH. So here we go, all aboard. Alright guys, so I ended up picking up this beautiful E33 locomotive. Here, I'll show you guys again. Can't get enough of her, right? She is just a beautiful machine. And this was picked up at the last York Train Show, fall 2021. And it was my first York show, my first locomotive purchased at a York show for an amazing, crazy low price, so I had to have her. Brought her here, and it was actually the first scale locomotive to run on the new layout, but this layout is now being destroyed part by part to make room for a brand new layout. So I wanted to do a review on this locomotive to capstone the layout, I guess, and move on to bigger and better things. But this E33 locomotive has a crazy history, and so before we get into the review of the locomotive itself, I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of the history and lineage of this awesome locomotive. So here we go. Alright guys, so the E33, a lot of you guys have seen her in Conrail schemes like this, Penn Central, Virginian, and also New Haven. And yes, this locomotive has had 5 different owners in its past history, but going all the way back to the 1920s, the Virginian Railway was looking for a more efficient way to transport heavy freight between Mullins, West Virginia, and Roanoke, Virginia. So they started using box cab electrics from Westinghouse. Now in the 1930s, 1940s, they started upgrading their box cabs here and there, and they finally bought 4 box cabs from GE, also known as EL2Bs, compared to the EL3As from Westinghouse. Now the Virginian would eventually talk to GE, and they sort of came up with this new and improved design for an ELC locomotive right here. So in 1955, these rolled off the assembly line, and 12 were produced between 1955 and 1957. So about a year and a half or so, 12 of these were made. And these locomotives would be numbered 130 to 141 for the Virginian Railway. And these were just absolutely amazing machines because they introduced their new rectifier technology called an ignitron technology. And that is basically, it involves mercury and tubes and electricity, so it sounds very dangerous and toxic and crazy, but at the time it was the new and improved greatest of the great. So a rectifier, what that does, takes your AC power up top on your catenary line, pulls it through the pantograph right here, guides the electricity through the internals of this locomotive to the rectifier circuit, and what that does converts your AC alternating current up top to DC direct current for the 6 traction motors on this particular locomotive. Now this locomotive featured 3,300 horsepower, max speed of 65 miles per hour, and a mass traction effort, starting traction effort of 98,000 pounds, which is just absolutely insane. So the first owner is the Virginian with their awesome scheme with the yellow, and eventually they get sold to the N&W because of their merge. Now in 1950, the N&W started scrapping ideas of electrifying more of the Virginian, and they were just kind of like, yeah, we'll just deal with diesels, you know, we're dealing with steam. The end of steam, we'll just deal with diesels for now. So in the early 1960s, the N&W completely scrapped their electrification program, which then these locomotives were sold to the New Haven, and that's where this crazy story picks up. So after the New Haven acquires these locomotives, the New Haven would then be accumulated by the Penn Central Railway, and then eventually Conrail and these locomotives would be retired in the early 1980s, I believe 1981. Now, I have seen the sister of the E33, and that was actually the E44 at the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum, and apparently those cannot run anymore due to PCBs, so I'm assuming that this thing is a giant PCB monster, and only 2 of these have survived out of the 12. One's in the Illinois Railroad Museum, one is also at the Virginia Museum of Transportation, which I'd love to see, and I believe their ELC, or E33 at this point in history, is sitting outside in the elements, which is just really sad. But yes, the Conrail, actually the Penn Central, would end up reclassing these locomotives as the E33. Now the New Haven actually classified them as an EF4. So there's 3 different names. So if you guys are ever looking for this particular rectifier locomotive, if you're looking for the Virginian, type in ELC. If you're looking for Conrail Penn Central, E33. And if you're looking for a New Haven, EL4. So it's just kind of an interesting play on words, but it's just how each railroad would classify these awesome locomotives. Also, while doing the research, I thought it was very interesting how we got from numbers 130 to 141 or 230 to 241 for the N&W, And then later on, we get the Pennsylvania numbering. So 4604 is actually a continuation off of the old Pennsylvania Railroad number system from Penn Central. They adopted their numbering system. So we got 4600 to 4610. Now these locomotives on the East Coast would actually operate on the Northeast Corridor for fast freight, but eventually Amtrak would end up ousting a lot of this electrified freight because it would take up either too much room, too much time, and too much just traffic on their rails. So these would be retired in 1981, as I said earlier. Alright guys, here she is, the Conrail E33 number 4604 from MTH Premier Line, going all the way back to 2000. So we're going to go top down with all the details, separately applied details, all that stuff. So starting up top, we have an operating pantograph. This is currently zip tied down to prevent this from springing up before we're inside the tunnel and breaking off. Be a nightmare if that actually broke off. On top, we also have separately applied details, such as this wire that comes down, goes into the locomotive, and in the rear there's another insulator and wire that you guys will see that go inside the locomotive. We have all these separately applied grab irons on the side of the catwalks, everything. Tons and tons of stamped detail in the ABS plastic body, like access doors for the locomotive, little ladder going up through the Consonel logo, and up front we have an F for front, separately applied grab irons up here, grab irons in the front, lighted number boards, headlight, separately applied metal horn, and also the bell is somewhere on the side, but that is also separately applied and made of metal, which is just super cool. Now this locomotive, like I said, has Proto Sound 1, tons and tons of crew talk, and it kind of, you hear something different every time you turn the locomotive on, so we'll let her sit for a little bit and see what we hear, but there's at least 2 or 3 patterns that I'm aware of, so here we go, let's start her up. There we go, we got that classic Proto Sound 1 ding ding, and you hear the locomotive start up. This is an electric locomotive, so there's no like diesel sound or anything like that. Alright, now she's idling, so now the crew talk should start up. And then you might also hear the air compressor start up as well.
There's 4 and then there's an empty guitar, I believe.
There's the air compressor, guys, starting up. You can kind of hear it chugging along. There's the coupler sound. And then there's also the shutdown phase. Alright guys, so those are the basic operating features of this locomotive. So it starts up in neutral, you can let it sit there, you'll hear it idle down, you hear an air compressor, you hear some crew talk in there. Then once you move the throttle all the way down, move it back up, you hear it click, the relay clicks on the inside, and it's able to go forward or reverse depending on which way you have it set. Now there is a reverse switch on the bottom so you can decide which side of the loco you want to go forward. Unfortunately, this one is stuck in reverse, so I run it long hood forward, I guess, kind of traditionally, but it works out. It's a great little loco, and really quickly I could turn the dial on the remote to switch the direction if it really bothers me. But while it sits in neutral, you'll hear all kinds of different crew talk, and I think there's even like a cab acknowledgement alarm that goes off if it sits long enough, and you'll hear all kinds of chatter and things. It's really cool. Now, a lot of the earlier PS1 stuff, you'll get freight sounds or station sounds. I don't believe this one has those. It just does the basic crew talk, bell, and horn. Now, I will say the horn in this one is an upgrade from my other PS1 locomotive that is from the late 90s. This horn is much more responsive to the remote and isn't as abrupt, and the rail sounds on this are much more smooth. So it could be a speaker One final point to add before we get to running this awesome locomotive. I would not run this on anything smaller than 054 curbs because of the electronics on the inside and the stress points on the trucks. On 054, I can kind of see that the engine already kind of struggles around curves and things like that. So anything larger than that would be great. Now the next layout I build up here will have 072, so this thing will be right at home, flying around the 072 curves. Now anyways guys, I got a bunch of really cool cars hooked up to run this with. I got some Penn Central, some Conrail in there, all mixed heavyweight freight. So here we go, all aboard. Alright everyone, that's going to do it for this video on the Conrail E33 number 4604 from MTH, Mike's Train House, Proto Sound 1, going all the way back to 2000, catalog 1. So I love this locomotive. Like I said, it's very sentimental to me. It's my first York Show locomotive and actually my first Conrail locomotive. I have been getting into Conrail stuff because of the kind of like the history of Conrail. It's just very interesting, and also the where they got their equipment from. Of course, there's a lot of PRR stuff and New York Central stuff mixed in there as well. So it's very interesting to me. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. I had a lot of fun making this video. I've learned a lot making this video as well. And it's been a while since I came out with a video because I have been busy with my own railroader career endeavors. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. And if you're new to the channel, always consider subscribing. Also love reading your guys' comments, and giving the video one of these really helps out the channel, gets us out there in the world. Until next time, everyone, happy railroading. We'll see you next time.